Whether clothing, furniture, electronics, vehicles or buildings, we surround ourselves with objects that we use only for a limited time. The resources which are extracted from planet Earth to make these objects are used once or twice and then dumped. Yet the resources on our planet are non-renewable and finite, except for rainfall, sunlight, biomass, animals and people. And our global commons have become waste dumps. Within 60 years, we have filled the oceans with millions of low-tech plastic objects and space with thousands of high-tech objects. So, the present industrial economy is not compatible with the natural resources and waste dumps available on planet Earth. More of the same is no business model for success. We need to create higher standards of living from a more intelligent resource use. More from less. I have an idea how to do it. Circularity. It's great, you'll love it. Circularity. That is how nature works. Water, biomass, CO2, seasons. Nature works in cycles, waste-free. Water and land are special cases. Sea level rise and erosion permanently reduce the land surface, and deforestation will diminish rainfall. As a result, droughts and wildfires may become more frequent, a vicious circle. For thousands of years, mankind was part of nature, functioning in loops. Use it up, wear it out, make it do and do without was the motto. But this was a circular economy of poverty and scarcity. 200 years ago, the Industrial Revolution uncoupled people from nature. Human ingenuity turned coal and iron into steam engines to replace horses, enabling men to produce enough food and shelter for all and provide faster mobility on land and water. 100 years ago, human ingenuity developed electricity, opening up the vertical dimension in cities and turning night into day. And oil complemented coal as abundant energy supply. Then, chemistry, engineering and finance opened the floodgates of mass production and turned industrialized countries into societies of abundance, allowing the world population to triple, billions of people to increase their health and quality of life, and democracy to flourish within the last 70 years. This is industrial man's success story. But abundance also led to oversupply, saturated markets, and omnipresent waste. We lost control of our waste dumps because the industrial economy is linear. The industrial economy is like a river. You cannot stop it, or you cause a flood. So the goods that are produced have to be sold, and the goods have to be produced to maintain the income and GDP and wealth for the nations. Growth in the industrial economy means throughput. It means producing more, whereas in the circular economy, growth can be measured as an increase in quantity and quality of stocks. In other words, the industrial economy is about flows and throughput in a one-way street that ends in a cul-de-sac. It is also about lost liability control. At the point of sale, the liability for the use of objects and their end-of-life waste passes from manufacturers to buyers, consumers, to you and me, to society at large. Nobody's liability. The cost will be borne by the taxpayer. Now, the circular industrial economy is applying circularity to the stocks of manufactured objects, cultural and human capital. But this is a circular economy of abundance, not of scarcity. And it is driven by human ingenuity and social innovation, such as repair cafes and neighborhood help, not by sheer necessity. To understand how circular industrial economy works, let us have a look at cars. Imagine that car manufacturers find a way to double the product life of cars. That would reduce by half the number of cars that need to be produced in a saturated market. It would reduce, therefore, resource consumption by half. It would reduce the waste of cars scrapped by half. But it would also reduce the revenue of manufacturers by half.
You know, I'd like to try that.
Car manufacturers now have two options. They can increase the revenue in the use phase, and they can increase the revenue in the end-of-life phase. In the use phase, it means investing in operation and maintenance, whereas before they only invested in manufacturing plants. And in the end-of-life phase, it means getting parts, components back for remanufacturing and reuse in new cars. So closing the loop, but as they are not the owners of the cars, there may be other people who take other options. So therefore the car manufacturer, if he really wants to exploit the full product life of cars, he has to change his business model from selling cars to selling the utilization of cars. That means he has to retain the ownership of the cars and also internalize the liability for risks and waste. And his interest is now to produce cars that use little maintenance, that are easy to operate and can be dismantled and components reused easily at the end of a life. It also means that the technology choice is open because electric cars, for example, have a much longer life and need no maintenance. Electric engines last for 100 years, combustion engines 30 years. So it opens completely new opportunities to make bigger profits with less effort. But it means assuming a much higher responsibility for cars as a system and assuming all the liability for operating a car fleet. Now let us look at the customers. Customers that want mobility instead of vehicles. Let us call it self-drive taxis. Customers become users with a duty of stewardship, and they profit from flexible access to vehicles and the fixed price per use unit. We have recently seen a proliferation of such on-demand services for cars and bicycles, facilitated by smartphones and the Internet of Things. And thanks to big data, the rent for such services drops towards zero, and completely autonomous vehicles may be just around the corner. I call this a performance economy. By selling goods as a service, businesses sell the performance, retain the ownership of goods and their embodied resources over the full lifetime of their products, and increase profits from the use and the end-of-life phases. That implies internalizing all costs of liability, of risks and waste, which provides strong financial incentives to prevent losses and waste. In exchange, companies gain a future resource security and price guarantee for future resources, and save compliance and transaction costs over competing manufacturers, building virtuous circles. Selling performance is not something revolutionary. Inns and hotels, taxis, railways, airlines, shipping lines, public toilets, public concert halls have sold utilization for a long time at a fixed price. Performance economy makes sense for governments, companies, and individuals. For governments, because they buy goods as a service, which is a smart way of public procurement policy. Buying services instead of hardware has become the preferred procurement option, for instance, of NASA, the US Armed Forces, Pentagon, and has sparked a number of innovative startup companies, notably SpaceX and its reusable Falcon 9 rocket. Similarly, private finance initiatives enable nation-states to build infrastructure without increasing public debt. The Eurotunnel under the Channel and numerous toll bridges, tunnels, and roads worldwide are telling examples. Liability remains entirely with the PFI owner. Manufacturers sell performance instead of good because it enables them to broaden the profit bases, because they can now exploit system solutions. Examples are textile leasing of hotel linen, hospital textiles, but also chemicals, leasing services, rent-a-molecule, agricultural services, engineering management systems. These examples are just the tip of the iceberg of selling performance and utilization optimization. For individuals, purchasing objects such as IT, cars and bicycles, even textiles and furniture, which rapidly decrease in value, does not make economic sense. Renting them is a stress-free option. However, buying objects that do increase in value makes sense, such as houses and apartments. How do we get there naturally? Governments normally have a preference for stability. Framework conditions therefore tend to favor the status quo, which is the linear throughput economy. Witness the annual $1 trillion subsidies for fossil fuel extraction and consumption to ease global supply chains. One single shift would make a big difference in favor of the circular economy, which is labor-intensive but uses little resources. Do not tax renewable resources, and human labor, human work is a renewable resource. Tax things instead that you don't want, such as the consumption of non-renewable resources or waste or emissions. This will bring about the rapid expansion not only of the circular economy for manufactured capital, but equally for all other activities based on stock optimization. Caring services, such as health and education, will benefit from this shift as much as services to look after our natural and cultural heritage. A second reason to favor labor over energy is that labor is the most versatile and adaptable of all resources, with a strong but perishable qualitative edge. It is the only resource capable of creativity and with the capacity to produce innovative solutions. But human skills deteriorate rapidly if unused. A person who has been unemployed for a few years risks becoming unemployable, and that comes with a cost to the state. A circular economy has a greater need for labor than the linear industrial economy for structural reasons. Roughly 3/4 of all industrial energy consumption is associated with the extraction or production of basic materials like steel and cement, while only about 1/4 is used in the transformation of raw materials into finished goods such as machines or buildings. The converse is true of labor. About 3 times as much is used in the conversion of materials to finished products as is required in the production of material. The circular economy reduces the centralized, highly mechanized extraction and production of raw materials and multiplies the local service activities for objects in use, such as repair, remanufacturing, dismantling, cleaning, quality control, which are labor and skill intensive and which have to be done where the clients are. Other intelligent moves are to stop charging VAT, value-added tax, on value preservation activities such as reuse, repair and remanufacturing, and to give carbon credits for the prevention of greenhouse gas emissions, not only for their reduction. Finally, to make this happen, we need to spread the knowledge of the circular economy from fleet managers and SMEs today to schools and universities. Every student leaving these institutions needs to know about the circular economy and the performance economy. So when they start businesses, they can put this strategy immediately and profitably into practice. Circularity is one way to create resilient societies and corporations, and it is based on people, human capital, and people's motivation, caring to achieve this aim. A circular industrial economy is driven by human ingenuity and determination to optimize existing stocks and preserve existing value. It is directed by economics. The environmental and social benefits are consequences of a circular economy. By selling goods as services, selling performance, economic actors retain the ownership of goods and their embodied resources. They maintain value and have to internalize liability. In exchange, companies gain resource security and increase corporate and national resource security. Or, to put it differently, the goods of today are the resources of tomorrow at yesterday's resource price.